Hello and welcome back to the Edge of the Box podcast. We're here this week to preview the FA Cup final that's coming on Saturday. The Premier League is done and dusted. It's now time for all the cup finals. I'm joined by Dan Worth from Who Scored and Jonathan Wilson live from his hotel room in Budapest as well. So let's go then. Let's preview this FA Cup final. The first order of business, Jonathan, is Manchester City's goalkeeping department. We'll eliminate Scott Carson from this discussion. Still Manchester City's number 3, but Ortega has played in the cup, all the way through. You get to the final, it's always like, if you want to, do you stick with the backup goalkeeper, or in the final, should you be playing your best team? What do you think Pep would do?
I mean, it depends what he said to Ortega, but I would assume you'd pick your best team. It would seem a very odd decision to me to jeopardise a treble. Yeah, to make a second choice keeper feel better about themselves. I just think you bring Ederson in, and you suspect Ederson might have come in for semi final if it had been against a team that threatened City a bit more than Sheffield United did. So, I mean, Ederson, I don't think has had, by his standards, a great season, but he's still a better keeper than Ortega. So, I would have thought it would be Ederson. I'd be surprised if it's not.
So I disagree with you. I think it'll be Ortega. And he played like last season. They got knocked out the FA Cup at the semi-final stage, and he played Stefan in goal. And he had an awful game. And I think they got pummeled 3-0 or 4-0 by Liverpool in the end and got knocked out. So Pep has got previous of sticking with the sub goalkeeper, because you'd have thought against Liverpool in that game he'd have gone back to Ederson perhaps, and he didn't. So he's got previous for sticking with the sub keeper, and I've quite liked the look of Ortega. I've got to be honest, whenever I've seen him, I think his distribution's really good. I quite like his techniques for one-on-ones as well. He's played a few games recently in the league as well, which kind of tells me that they're trying to keep him fit and ready to have him playing games coming up to the FA Cup final. So I actually think Ortega may play. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, as you said, Ortega's played all of City's FA Cup games and they've not conceded once. They haven't played the most difficult teams. I think they played Chelsea and Arsenal are the two that stand out, but at the start of the season in the early round, so probably weren't too up for it.
Chelsea are probably one of the easiest teams to play, in fairness, in the FA Cup.
Very true. So I feel like, yeah, it's usually harsh if they play every game, but to play every game and not concede, it feels a little more harsh. But it's also impossible to disagree with Jonathan, right? You play your best team in the final, because we've seen it before multiple times where second choice keepers have been brought in, usually circumstantial, and had howlers. And you look at Karius in that Champions League final for Liverpool.
He was their number one. He was their number one at that point.
True. Yeah, true. I think that was circumstantial, though, right? Maybe I'm confused, but
I think he was genuinely their number one. In fairness, they couldn't have bought Alisson any quicker after that. After that cup final.
But so if you're vying for a treble, you really don't want to put more pressure on a second choice keeper. I don't think so. For that reason, I would probably go for Ederson, but it does feel like Ortega is a little hard done by if he misses out.
When did this become so fashionable to do the second choice goalkeeper thing in cups? It never used to be a thing until maybe 5-6 years ago, and then it suddenly became very popular. One manager must have done it, and then everyone else just started copying them. Can you remember, Jonathan?
I mean, yeah, you're right. It's clearly to do with the diminution of the FA Cup, that people just don't take it as serious anymore, and the standard thing is to rest players. If you're a top sort of 6 side, to rest players in the early rounds. And it is a way of keeping your second choice keeper involved and keeping them interested. And if you're sort of going into an FA Cup third round game thinking, well, if we lose today, it's not the end of the world, then it makes complete sense. I just think by the time you get to this stage, I think Guardiola must care about the treble. I know that Champions League is clearly the priority, but this would only be the 10th treble ever done across Europe, or maybe possibly the 11th. It would only be the second done by an English team. So I can't believe he'll take this game lightly, and he's got a week between this and the Champions League final. So, in terms of fatigue and making sure players aren't rested, are rested for the Champions League final, I would have thought, if anything, you want to play players to keep them in rhythm, which is always a danger at this stage of the season, that the players suddenly have 2 weeks without a game and they get to the Champions League final and they're not quite on it as a result. So I sort of think, even if you're looking at the FA Cup final in terms of preparation for Champions League final, you play Ederson, because you don't want him to have gone 2 weeks without a game.
Yeah, he played the last league games, didn't he, against Brentford, Edison. But in some ways, again, that tells me that Ortega's going to play. I think Ortega played the couple before. So, look, it'll be interesting. Pep will probably think there's not too much difference between the two of them, and a big way of Man City's game they play is the goalkeeper distributing from the back, and Ortega is very good with his feet. He's got a killer distribution on him. But it'll be really interesting to see what they do. I mean, there's no such discussions at Manchester United. David De Gea, I think, has played pretty much every game this season in all the cup competitions, so that they won't have to worry about who they put in goal. Let's talk about Haaland then against Manchester United. He's had his best and second worst rated performances of the season against Manchester United, Dan, according to WhoScored's algorithm.
There's no surprises. The best rated was when he scored that emphatic hat-trick against United, and then when United beat City 2-1, he didn't really have too much impact. So
there was that goal that day that you liked, wasn't there, Dan?
Yeah, not the best goal of the season, but one that really defines Haaland. Yeah, that happened on that occasion for sure. To be perfectly honest, I'm not sure how much you can read into it. His worst rated performance, he's going to have one or two lower than beast mode performances, so that just happened against Man United. But I think more importantly that loss to United on the whole was a bit of a wake-up call for Pep, because you see, I don't think it was the game after. I think they played Spurs in the game after, but the game after that was Wolves, when Pep went to the three at the back to kind of really try and get the best out of Haaland, and you see an immediate impact and he scores a hat-trick. So I think maybe it's less of a reflection on Haaland, but more that when he had that second worst rating performance against Man United, Pep kind of had to go away and do what Pep does and re-strategize, and it's clearly worked. They've gone on probably since then and had an amazing season. So yeah, I think it was quite an important that defeat was quite an important one in defining City's season.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see him play at Wembley, won't it, Jonathan, in the cup final as well, because Nathan Jones, as we know, managed to knock out Man City before they could get to the League Cup final, so and go for the quadruple. So this is our first chance to see Haaland in a cup final, and then of course we'll get to see him again in the Champions League final a week later.
And he didn't have a great game in the Community Shield.
Good point. Yeah,
he missed two. I think he had 7 touches in that game and missed 2 really good chances. I mean, that game against United at Old Trafford, I think I'm right in saying he had 20 touches in that game. I think it was 19. Yeah, on the day the sack came out, it was 19, and the next day it was upgraded to 20. And I remember writing a piece around then saying that the equivalent game of the previous season, when City had won very emphatically 2-0, the player with the fewest touches for City was Gundogan with 74, I think, 70 something. So you was basically saying Haaland had the player with the fewest touches had a quarter of a number of touches of a player with the fewest touches the previous season. And I think that's sort of a good way of encapsulating how City have had to change how they play. That domination of possession that Guardiola likes to give them that control. Obviously, if you have 10 outfield players plus Edison doing that, it's much easier than when one of the outfield players isn't quite so involved. So one of the things I remember from that game at Old Trafford was there was I think it was when the score was still at 1-0 to City, it was possibly at 1-1, and there was an injury, and the game was stopped, and Guardiola was sort of 4 or 5 yards on the pitch, furiously screaming at Haaland, sort of doing that, wanting him to come deeper, wanting him to be more involved in the play. And Haaland was sort of didn't look entirely convinced by that. But that is partly what's happened in the game since. I mean, since that Tottenham game, I think City have only been behind for 15 minutes all season. So I think it's only that 5 minutes at the end of the Brentford game, 10 minutes in the first half against Liverpool when they ended up winning 4-1. So that's how they've been able to, once they've flicked into that extra gear, just how unstoppable they've been.
But what do you think he'll do team selection, Pep? Because when I haven't got a massive squad, Man City, but you could probably pick their best team. You could probably pick, if you have picking their best team for a final, so Edison would obviously be in goal. Probably 10 of the spaces are probably taken. The only one maybe up for debate is on that right hand side. But do you think he'll go? Let's say he's picking would he pick his strongest team for the FA Cup final and his strongest team for the Champions League final? Would those two teams be the same?
I'd say not necessarily, but in this case, probably yes. Yeah, I think Guardiola is somebody who would change team to team, but you look at the challenge that United are going to put up against you. I think in some ways that the team for the United game is easier to predict than for playing against Inter, who will play with a back three, will play with two centre forwards. The big question is, do you play Bernardo or Mahrez on the right? I guess there is an argument for Mahrez running at Luke Shaw, but I still think you probably go for Bernardo because his movement is so good. Everybody talked about how well Camavinga would play that left back role, but Bernardo just sort of finds space in behind him, and that's what turns the games, or what gives City the goals in that first half of the second leg of a Champions League semi. So I would assume Walker would play it right back to negate Rashford rather than trying to do something clever with Stones. I think Stones would play in the middle. So I would think it's the fairly obvious City team. The only question is whether it's Bernardo on the right or Mahrez on the right, and then whether Bernardo maybe plays in the middle rather than Gundogan. But Gundogan's been playing so well recently. Why would you?
Got to play Gundogan.
Why would you mess around with that? So, I think the selection for the FA Cup final is pretty obvious. He may do something a bit different to play against Inter's 3-5-2.
Yeah, be interesting to see that's for sure. Manchester United, I'm not sure there's anything specific, Dan, that they can do to counter Manchester City or try and negate certain things about Manchester City. But a player who's come under fire really throughout his Manchester United career is Victor Lindelof. Since Martinez is out, he's actually looked pretty astute into them. I've never thought he was actually as bad as perhaps people made out. I just felt that Manchester United weren't a stable team, and it was very difficult to come in and out of that side. But now they've got like a framework and a template under Erik ten Hag. Lindelof's actually looked really good.
And yeah, I imagine Man United fans were pretty worried when Martinez went off against Sevilla because he had been kind of their staple at the back. But on the whole, United defence, especially in the league, has been pretty strong.
At home, it's been very good.
Yes, but particularly at home. And surprisingly, they've actually been conceding fewer goals with Lindelof in the side. Averaging 0.79 when Lindelof has featured, and without him it's 1.3. Now, that's just a little bit of variance, so you never know how much that is solely down to him and how much that is down to the team. But they also have a higher winning percentage in the league, 71%. So I think, he's been more than capable. He's proven more than capable, but then we've just spoken about Haaland, and you probably need to be better than more than capable to handle Haaland. So I think this is going to be a very interesting battle.
Jonathan, do you see a world in which Manchester United win this cup final at the weekend? It's going to be tough.
Like City are obviously massive favourites, but United have beaten them this season. It is a Manchester derby. It is a final. United have memories of '77 when they stopped Liverpool winning the treble. I think City maybe have their absolute supreme spell of form may have just dipped off. I think it's pretty well attested that Guardiola aims to peak end of April, beginning of May. I think we saw that the way they accelerated through the run in. Maybe that little downturn in form. So we're talking a very minor downturn, but maybe that little blip post Champions League semi-final is just to do with the fact that the league title was essentially wrapped up and they were changing a few things and maybe not playing fully at 100% of capacity. They don't look quite as remorseless as they did, say, 3 weeks ago. So I think City will win. I think City will probably win pretty comfortably, but there's clearly a chance, and it's good for the sense of spectacle that it is United, that there is. It's not just the FA Cup on the line. There's also this sort of sense of regional pride. United wanting to protect their record as the only English club to win the treble, and I think they should put up a bigger fight than I think Inter will in the Champions League final. City massive favourites, but it's not impossible United could do it.
No, I do actually think it'll be close. I don't think Man City will run away with it, but I do think obviously they're the clear favourites. Let's do the combined 11s then. And Jonathan, I'm not even going to ask you what your combined 11 is because I'm assuming it's just a Man City turn.
Yeah.
Not even couldn't get Luke Shaw in at left back or anything like that. Just the Man City
nope.
team.
No, happy with Kanji at left back.
Who are you picking at right midfield? Bernardo or Mahrez?
Bernardo.
Bernardo's in. You like Bernardo, don't you? He's always in your team. So yeah, he's a good player.
Really, I like him as a footballer. I think he seems like quite an annoying bloke, but I like him as a footballer.
Oh yeah, he's always having a go at the ref, isn't he? He's always getting cross. Dan, I'm assuming WhoScored have then done the opposite and gone for the entire Manchester United 11.
No. But we have gone 4-4-2, which I'm sure you'll both be pleased to hear.
Again, it's something I don't even need to ask because I just know it's coming.
We've used the FA Cup rating, so it has thrown out a few differences to probably what you'd imagine. We've got Ortega in goal, Walker, Akanji, Laporte, and Shaw in defence. Mahrez, Casemiro, De Bruyne, and Foden in midfield, and Haaland and Alvarez up top. So yeah, just Casemiro and Shaw in for United.
Yeah, I think Jonathan's team might win.
The thing is that team you could play in a 4-3-3.
Yeah, because Alvarez.
You play Alvarez wide, and did you say so? Was it Mahrez on the right? You had.
Yeah.
Yeah, and play Mahrez wide right. Then Foden in midfield rather than on the left. That's
true.
It's not what they do, Jonathan. Just stop trying to stop trying to force them. They don't want to move away from 4-4-2. It's not what WhoScored want to do. That's their formation, and they are not changing it for love nor money. Probably there'll be a new format. Everyone plays really 4-3-3, don't they? And then there'll be in 10 years' time there'll be a new formation everyone plays, and then that's when Martin Lawrence will give it the okay to move to 4-3-3 when teams are playing a different formation. Yeah, we're not changing from 4-3-3. It's always 4-4-2, Jonathan. You're always 4-3-3. Oh no, actually, you do tend to tailor it towards which teams we're talking about. In fairness,
but I would instinctively go 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3, which are not that far removed from each other. But...
Okay, then let's have some score predictions then for the final. Jonathan, what would you go with?
3-1 to City.
3-1 to City. I'm going to go 2-1 to Manchester City. Dan?
Yeah, I think it will be close. I'm just going to go 1-0 to City, I think.
1-0? Ooh. I hope it's a bit more exciting than that. I'd like it to be an exciting game at the week because there's no football on all. I know the Europa League finals tomorrow. We have got that, but generally there's not a lot. There's been football on nearly every day for weeks and weeks and weeks. I hate it when that happens and then it goes away because I don't know what to do with myself in the evenings. I find it really difficult when there's no football on. But Jonathan, have a nice time at the Europa League final. Hope you have a lovely time reporting on it. Dan, have a great week as well. Sorry about Reading getting relegated. And yes, that's it. That's it for the edge. I know it's not it for the Edge of the Box podcast at all, is it? Because we're doing the Champions League final preview the week after, I believe. So no, we've got one more show left before the end of the season, but do subscribe to the channel with your post notifications on so you know exactly when that's coming. Go back and check our award show. We went through Player of the Year, Young Player of the Year, all those kind of things in a show before this one, so go and check that out if you haven't watched it already. Have a good weekend, enjoy the football and stay safe. Looked like you did a little dab at the end then. Do you want to fit I presume you were sneezing, but you did a little dab to end the show.